Okay,
pretty good.
we'll send it to Maya now and see.
Yeah, I'll see if you need it.
And move this so I don't trip over.
Oh, it's time.
Yeah, I guess we're good to start anything.
Okay, I can do it first.
Yeah.
Slide and then I'll introduce it to you. Okay. All right, thanks everyone for coming. Excited to talk to you today about a website that was launched late last year, for the Royal Ontario Museum. So if you're looking at your phones during the presentation, I assume you're looking at this beautiful new website. And we're specifically going to talk today about information architecture and content. So there's lots of parts of the project I think we could have discussed. Perry's presented in the past about like the whole migration, and we are happy to answer any questions. But today we're really going to delve into how the project showcases how creating a strong information architecture benefits the user experience and benefits the whole project, the whole website. So if you haven't met us before, we'll just introduce ourselves. My name is Suzanne Degacheva. I'm one of the co-founders of Evolving Web. So we're an agency in Montreal, and we work a lot in higher education, public sector, and I work a lot in content strategy and discovery on our projects and support our team. And Perry will introduce himself.
And I'm Perry Shepherd. I work at the Royal Ontario Museum. I manage our web properties as well as some of our internal digital properties. I've been there just 2.5 years now. So let's get started. So the Royal Ontario Museum, for those of you that don't know, is one of Canada's largest museums, and it's a top 10 museum in North America. There's a research aspect to our institute, so we do actually have field researchers, and part of our mandate includes engaging with the public through events, learning opportunities, research, and educational resources, which becomes important when we start talking about content types. You can see a few pictures here. So it's a very large institution, and when I started in April of 2023, on my first day, in the very first meeting, I was told we were doing a full redesign of the website. So that is how I started at ROM. So unfamiliar with the content, unfamiliar with how people worked in the institution, what the different departmental units worked through. So generally unfamiliar with the site content. So immediately identified that we would need to dive into that, get a better understanding of it, ultimately so that we could vet throughout the process what needed to stay in, what needed to go. I also needed to better understand those business processes so that we could effectively interpret and validate what stakeholders were going to report. And the further we got into this process, the more obvious it became that we needed external help. And at that point, we engaged with Evolving Web to assist in the full redesign of the site. So in late 2023, we started into that redesign process. I'm going to hand it over to Suzanne, who's going to talk about some of that.
Yeah, so in terms of the scope of the project, there were a lot of drivers at play, which is great because everybody's motivated to get a new beautiful site up and running, but it also can muddy the waters in terms of having a lot of priorities. So first of all, the site was on Drupal 7, so an upgrade was definitely necessary before the end of life. There was also a brand alignment that needed to happen because walking into the ROM, you saw the new brand, but the website really didn't reflect that. You saw a couple of screenshots. And not just brand in terms of like, oh, the logo needs to be updated, but really the presence of the museum, this world-class nature, the academic role that ROM plays, the educational role. This really wasn't coming through in terms of the brand story. And so there were a lot of things to focus on. Just doing a migration in of itself could have been a project. Just doing the rebrand could have been a project. But one thing that really became clear that we needed to focus on was content. And that's because of the years of history of the existing site, the fact that there were so many nooks and crannies of content that had been created over time, responding to the needs of different departments. And so our tactics really had to include this content audit and focus on restructuring content really from the ground up. So not just trying to migrate content as is across the board, but doing a refactoring of how the content fits together and really rethinking things. And so, yeah, so why this focus on content? I think a content audit can be a simple thing you do in an afternoon, or it can take months and months and a whole organization. And in this case, we had to get not just our team involved, as an agency coming back with content recommendations, but we needed to enable the ROMs team to really adopt a new content model themselves. And so a first step in getting everybody on board is defining the framework for what content needs to be. Like what are the labels that we use for things? And words matter, especially in a context where people are, entomologists, and they have their own language that they use. We kind of needed to get everybody on the same page using the language, not just of Drupal, but of information architecture. So we were talking about, what actually defines a content type, what defines a taxonomy, and what are our criteria for these things, and then what are the relationships and attributes that tie everything together. So as an agency going and doing an assessment of the content, we really tried to start with an outside-in approach. So not starting with the existing set of content types, but more looking at what the website needed to communicate in terms of actually speaking to the public. And we started to identify some patterns. So we didn't look at what are all the events, but rather we started to label things as events that seemed like they had similar attributes and played a similar function. So even though something like a lecture on a film and a tour of the museum and a evening event at the ROM seem to be quite different things in a way in terms of how they're maybe presented on the website. Maybe they share a lot of the same attributes and play a similar role and have similar processes around them. So we took this approach to looking at real examples of content, not just looking at things abstractly, and then trying to apply labels to what we saw on the page in terms of what are the attributes that are there, how are things organized, what are the taxonomies that are currently used, and what relationships exist that have value and need to be retained in the new model. And then we also took the more granular, inside-out approach. So, of course, as a Drupal person, I want to open up the database, or I want to go and look at the content types. I want to see what fields are there and what the source data we're going to be mapping from is. And this is really important because you don't want to forget about the nooks and crannies. You don't want to be really intentional. If you decide that, we're not going to keep that podcast content or this little series of events that somebody created, yes, those are going to still be events. You want to take that all into account. And so this was really important, I think, specifically in terms of taxonomies. There were just so many different vocabularies that existed that had either overlap or that were maybe orphaned or whatnot. We really wanted to make sure we were taking all of that into account. And so what we ended up at this stage, after this assessment, was a map, a new content model that we kind of came back with, both as a proposal, but also to start using as a filter to really looking at what this would mean for the whole content experience. And so I love maps like this. I don't know how well you can see everything, but you can kind of see that actually quite a few of the content types that we end up with, the core ones, people, galleries, exhibitions, events, and programs, they're all actually related. There are really key relationships that exist between them. And given that this is much fewer content types than what we had before, it means that we can build, we're going to show and talk about later, but we can build stronger user experiences based on these relationships. So you have that kind of core of set of related content types, and then you also have collections, projects, and objects which are related as well. And so this work actually meant consolidating and removing a lot of content types where there was great overlap, especially for events. And I think what was really driving us towards this model as well was knowing the business priorities of the ROM. So the first time I met with Perry, we sat down, we were in the ROM, we saw like all the complexity of the building we were in and the type of institution it was. And the real focus that we talked about was events. The fact that, yes, some people just decide they're going to go to the museum, but other people are really driven by the fact that they're going to go there to have an experience, right? Like, we talk about, selling experiences, and so there's so many things that the ROM was offering that just weren't getting exposure. So really by focusing on making events one of a smaller set of content types, we could orient the whole experience more around that content itself. So that was a real driver of this. And then we'll talk more about events, programs, and exhibitions later. But really defining those really well at this stage was like a key part of the proposal. And so what this led to, having this model, allowed us to start evaluating the content itself. And this is where kind of a more granular review of content can start. So you have to have a new framework to fit things into, to have kind of your big buckets. And then you can go a little bit more page by page and say, well, what are the implications of this? If we have events and programs and there's a relationship between them, then which content types are we reducing? Or what content do we actually just decide to delete completely? So are there whole categories of content that just aren't essential to the experience? And so also having this framework, I think the ROM was really active in doing that granular review and making those decisions, but it meant that we could look and see, okay, there's certain content that simply hasn't been updated in the last year or the last 2 years, and what percentage of that content can we remove. There were many content types that was easy to remove because they were not active, and then there were also categories of content that we could just outright delete. So the result of this was then being able to go into the design phase with a fresh information architecture that allowed us to really lean on those relationships. So although the content audit takes a lot of time, doing it before jumping into design means that then in design we have content types that we can really clearly draw on. So there's now, like, if you look at the ROM itself, you have this presentation of programs, you have this presentation of events that is quite strong. And Perry's going to talk through a little bit about that specific program-event relationship.
So just to place it in context, in the year leading up to the new site launch, ROM hosted about 860 events. So it is definitely our most active piece of content. The 1,500 pieces of content that we remove, if you take out press releases and events, that was well over half of the active content on our site. So it was a massive sweep, a very significant change, and certainly in taking a look through the architecture and getting to a point where we could identify programs as an overarching content type that didn't previously exist, really helped to drive some of this. And that was really part of that process. It was really important to develop really strong relationships with our stakeholder groups across ROM, particularly because I was new. leading the project on the client side, making these new connections, but working with evolving web and the insight research that was being done. What those relationships and the constant communication allowed us to do is go back as we were working through, having consistent conversations and follow-up conversations to really understand, because you start with a conversation and someone says, as Suzanne's already mentioned, is that you've got a group that thinks that their event is significantly different than somebody else's event. It's the same thing, right? But they tell you about this thing, and on first pass, you're listening to them, you're taking notes, and you're just basically absorbing that. But ultimately you get to that spot where you're starting to synthesize this, and you realize, okay, these 8 things are actually just one thing. And that really helped us along the way, these new relationships that we had within the organization. So definitely encourage you to start strong in that process to make sure that you're reaching out to different groups that you need to, building those relationships, keeping the communication strong, because you can't create in a bubble. And I think, what you're hearing constantly, the more AI that's involved, the more people talk about how important those relationships with actual individuals become. And that certainly was the case here. So this gave us the opportunity to follow up with our stakeholders. We had a number of stakeholders that really didn't have a lot of technical knowledge, so they couldn't sort of pre-parse the information they were giving us. So there was a lot of, again, synthesis on our side. The greatest amount of time that we spent really was translating what we were hearing into an effective solution, and ultimately consolidating a number of those content types to simplify the presentation. So various content structures have previously been modeled as though they were unique, as I said, and taking that time to engage with the stakeholders helped us get to a spot where we ended up with a model of what is essentially programs and events. And it's something that some of your clients may benefit from as well. A program ultimately is an ongoing initiative of any sort. It exists for we'll just say forever, until that initiative ends, versus an event which has a defined start and end date. Now what that allows us to do is connect those two. The program never leaves the site. So any SEO value from marketing, from schema development in the background, we retain that because that page always exists. These events come and go. So as the event comes down, we retain that SEO value, and that relationship really helped. It also helped that really concise event and program content type really helped with the user experience. So it's consistent, it's basically teaching the language of our website to our users. We do have a lot of members, over 25,000 members at ROM, so we get a lot of return visitation to our site. They want to navigate, they want to find out what's going on this week. So we're teaching them this model that is consistently presented to them, and it really helps in the user experience. That clear and consistent content type development also provides those pathways that are consistent. So easy to find information, and when they're looking for new information, they know exactly the process to go through. So we have a lot of younger people go to ROM After Dark as an example, but as they get into their late 20s, early 30s, they move into a different cycle, with something that we've seen for almost 100 years now. And the reality is that they start looking for adult conversations or member weekends, things of that nature, but they've gone through the process of purchasing a ticket for ROM After Dark. It's exactly the same process for these other programs. And you can see here, we get the value of being able to set up a view and syndicate the content, drop it in wherever we need to. And again, because these pages live on past like a singular event, we can promote them across the site that way. And the results, Suzanne?
Yeah, so we talked about creating a strong content model. Now, what does that actually lead to when we look at how the website looks and then how it lives on after the launch? So one example is, we already talked a bit about programs and events, but another key content type is people. And people on the ROM website is everyone. So everyone from the curator to a director to other staff members, this all uses the same content type. And so by reducing the number of content types, each content type does have to carry more weight. So the template for people, for example, this is a curator who has a very lengthy bio of, really exciting work in dinosaurs, being the ROM. And so there's quite a lot of content there, but the same template also has to adapt to, much shorter bios of other staff members. But then the strength is that then we have the ability to easily spin up a leadership page, which shows a combination of these different profile types. So it's really easy to create listings, it's easy to mix and match different people, but each content type and the template that goes with it is designed to be more robust. Another area that's interesting when the content model is really tight is that by having fewer content types, each one you can kind of invest more thought in its discoverability. So Perry mentioned the benefit of having SEO value from programs that live on the site over time and are always available. We also put work into adding schema.org data to the content types, because particular content types, people, articles, events, exhibits, these are things that really lend themselves well to, in Google search results, having Google features that get used to display the results in more interesting ways. So for example, if you're looking for event content, because the schema.org data is there, you can see already at a glance the date of the event, and because things are properly tagged, it's really presenting the real event date in that data. And the same thing is used for exhibitions. So you can see how long the exhibit is lasting, and that's again using that same schema.org. You never really know how this data is going to be interpreted. Like Google has a mind of its own. You might do a Google of events at the ROM and you won't see any of this data show up. Sometimes it does show up. Algorithms also change quite a bit. But just by having the data tagged, in future, I think Google's going to be relying even more on this in its AI overviews and things like this. So it's good to have that there. And the real benefit is just like it's a lot of work to do that and test it for every content type. So tightening up the structure and just focusing on, we're doing this for events, we're doing this for articles, like that's really valuable to be able to do.
So there were many benefits in this entire process, and certainly one of them was more efficient user management. Previously, our ROM website had either admin or user access. Those were the only permissions available, and it was direct to publish. So a lot of challenges when you've got 40 or 50 individual content creators on your sites with such a kind of vast array of experience and knowledge. We would end up with a lot of content bloat, because you'd have some person that's very keen to develop content, maybe isn't being vetted properly, hasn't been edited or copy edited by the appropriate people, just getting out onto the site. So with a reduction in content types, we were able to focus and really simplify our process. We also put into place the content moderation. So our permissions now work off of specific content types, and then editing versus publishing access, which is a really simple model for us. French translation is a separate group, and that's just a toggle. Very simple methodology. So if I have a new user, we send them the training documentation and the quiz, they finish that, and we get contacted, we add their permission, and we're good. And what this has really done is essentially aligned with our separate administrative silos. So you can see in the diagram here, the marketing team works with exhibition and gallery content, so they all have full access to those content. That is 100% their responsibility, so they can run on their own. For the education team, they have access to learning resources, and they're the only group that works with learning resources, so very easy permission set again to apply. And then there are a couple of things like programs that pretty much all of our users get access to. And nobody has publishing access for Pages, which also lends a little bit of additional oversight over standard structure of the site, and just ensures that things stay as they should be. So once you get into a spot like this, what you can then do is make use of those in some interesting ways. So we found that these well-structured content also lends to functional scaling. So I mentioned the learning resource type. We had a request in, I think it was early August, that we had school visits, and they needed to be able to sell packages of school visit products to school groups. And they'd sent the request in originally just saying, we're going to list this content on the site. They came up with a number of additional requirements. Very last minute, we need to be able to filter and search and all of the everything. And we have no content type specific for school visits, but we have a learning content type that just needed one additional taxonomy to suddenly extend that. And so we added a taxonomy term to an existing vocabulary, school visits, tagged all of these new products, and created one new vocabulary group taxonomy for what is essentially school visit classes. So things that align with the Ontario curriculum, and they can be tagged to be associated with those. And that took about a week and a half to implement really quickly, still aligns with the existing content model. So that flexibility, when things are organized in that way, we have found have been very effective. We're actually considering doing the same with events, where over the last year after the launch, we are receiving some feedback saying, this is really great, we love how this works, but we want events that the public can't access, or we want events, school visits, just that teachers can access. We want events for patrons. So adding just a new taxonomy to our events section and splitting those out so that we have public and maybe school visits, we've already implemented so that members have access in a different way. But ultimately, that structure has really helped us and simplified new development and function. It's also helped with the onboarding. I already mentioned the user permissions, but our training documentation, and I think somebody mentioned budgeting for, I would say budget for documentation in your future projects if you aren't already. We have about 175 pages, like what you would be 8.5 by 11 pages. It's actually on SharePoint, but of documentation for our users. We have it's basically a 2-hour course that new users go through, simple quiz to go along with that. We track it. Once they complete that, we give them basic access to the site. What is beneficial here is we are able to align their role with the training. So they don't have to complete all of the training. They complete what they specifically need. So they don't spend a lot of time sort of parsing through things. We've used a component-based design system. So content types were at large, and then components. You learn how to use the paragraphs, components. Once, you can use them anywhere. So really has helped with that. There's been a little bit of resistance to required training, but because we have a governance model and a governance committee that is supporting this process, and because all of this reduces communication, it's really, really helped the uptake. So ultimately, all of this to say that it simplified our training, documentation, and support effort because we can focus this. I think that any current presentation would be at a loss if we didn't mention AI. So Yes, we use AI. Interestingly, we've been focusing on foundational elements, and that has made the biggest change for us. So not a lot, the site looks beautiful, it functions marvelously, but really what the benefits have really been is just in the organization, the reliability, the very pragmatic approach. So yes, we do use AI on the site. Currently we're using for AI-assisted translation through TGM GT and DeepL. DeepL uses, I believe, OpenAI, so very standard setup, but it's very effective. Our site at launch, our site just prior to launch was 30% translated to French. On launch, it was 100%, and that was entirely because of the AI assist. We do have a French translation team. They ensure that anything that's automatically translated gets vetted, and we have a process for that. But that's how we're using AI currently. We're also developing an integration with your typical alt text AI generated assist. We're doing something a little bit more than just the out of the box, but essentially that. So beyond that, do you have any comments on AI with respect to this?
Yeah, just the fact that this was something I think we realized we had, just to paint the picture, this is something we realized we needed very shortly before launch, because although we had, at some point you think you have all the content and everything's translated, you're ready to go, but a lot of events, Perry talked about the quantity of events got populated, and we realized that the speed at which translation could happen, it wasn't going to be fast enough. And I think we saw, for those of you who are in the room at the previous AI presentation, a lot of the work that AI saves is also just clicking in and making the updates. And so the fact that AI-assisted translation, it's a tool that actually populates the draft of the new translation, gives you the interface to review and edit. Having this framework in place can save those translators doing the review a lot of time. Having that all built into Drupal is really beneficial. I think this is related back to content and information architecture, because simplifying everything we've talked about so far, the content model, and then the process for having content moderation, means that the translation workflow itself can be also simple. So implementing this kind of last minute was relatively straightforward, because the content types were already streamlined and we could select which content types this made sense for. We could do the testing of it with a lot less work than it would have taken with 60 content types.
Yeah, I think. So we can talk about this. So I mentioned 860 events the year prior to our site launch. Just tours this year will be well over 1,000. I'm guessing, because we haven't really pulled the data, 2,500 events now. Because the event system is so much better than it was, we're finding that there's a lot more use of it. So the promotion of things like internal tours on a daily, French tours, the Haunted ROM tour has been taking over recently, but also major events. We are to the point now where I'm getting emails about, hey, these 2 events have sold out. Can we add a 3rd date? How do I do that? And I reference the documentations under my team, they take care of it, but ultimately to say, I believe that there has been a direct correlation between the redesign of the site and the presentation of events and the surfacing of that content for people to be able to purchase and engage with ROM, which is fantastic, because I think as we've been coming out of COVID, people have been a little bit hesitant to engage. We measure things in decades at ROM, so we're still just coming out of COVID. But really to say that, ultimately we are finding that we are growing our audience back to pre-COVID numbers. People are starting to come out of their shells again, and I think this has been a really great development on the site. I think maybe we'll talk about this at the end, but I have a couple of other thoughts around this, and just the idea of synthesizing information, because we're still growing the site, we're still changing, and vetting new ideas. So, Suzanne, do you want to add any additional context here? This is me.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think you did. Yeah.
All right.
You did a good job.
So, change management is a bit of a challenge, as I said. Encouraging people to adopt new tools and new content types, immediately on launch, had a large contingent from one area of the institution that felt that programs were not appropriate for them. And what it came down to was actually a semantic issue. They kept on in their minds thinking, this isn't a program. ROM has actually a group of things called programs, and they just couldn't get beyond that. So after a long conversation, we just started referring to it as long-term initiatives, and that kind of helped. But there were constant conversations. It is unbelievable sometimes the challenges that you don't anticipate, and that was certainly one of them. There's also been a little bit of a challenge around the views that we developed, which are so great. The automated views, just grab all the programs, post them on this page, let us know how you want to promote these programs elsewhere in a more dynamic way. Nobody got around to it. So for the first 6 months after the site launch, the only generic view on our site of program presentation was one page called programs and a little bit on the learning section of the site, because somewhere along the way, the communication that they had control, they had access, they had the ability to promote their programs, they thought it was only through the program page. So after we got over that hurdle, things started to pick up. It's actually around the time that we launched the new training program, because we realized perhaps there was a bit of a gap in the training session. So we maintain a web advisory group. We have JIRA tickets for new feature requests. This really helps to reduce the constant emails about, I want them to do this. It also allows us to take the new features in a bucket and try to understand whether or not this is a new functional need, or if it's just a perceived, like, yes, you can already do that, here's how. Maybe it's a training gap, and we've seen that a number of times. The training helps people see what they can accomplish with the new content model, and certainly ensuring the adoption of the content types takes effort, right? So share your Eureka moments with your user groups. I think that's really important, because just because you have turned a corner and realized that all programs and all initiatives really are just the same thing, if you don't share that with anyone, it's going to make that adoption much more difficult. So we're moving into sort of that post-launch aspect of the site, and one of the things that we've recently identified is that we don't have a way or a content type to be able to funnel emergency messaging. And we have several sites that we would want to host this to. There's a very formalized vetting process for the messaging. So going through this process, ultimately we've determined this is going to require a new content type. And with that, we are just kind of in the first stages of development, but going through the process again of understanding what are the needs. Is this just the same thing? Like, could we do this with an existing type of content? Somebody at some point mentioned, well, can we just use an event to post this? And it's just a new type of event. And going through that conversation, it just made a lot more sense to be able to say, this group of people on the emergency response team have access to this content type, so we're going to develop that as a new content type. So the takeaway here is just don't be too stingy with the content. Like, as I love the reduction, I love the sort of clean look of our site, but at a certain point, you don't want to try and fit a square peg into a round hole. So keep an open mind as you go through. And then I think.
Yeah, so we've been talking a lot, but this is actually a really beautiful site. I see not everybody opened their phone. Some people were only listening to the presentation. So we're gonna play a little video so you get a chance to actually see a little bit. And of course, you're gonna go home and buy a ticket to the ROM, I hope. Go to at least one event, I'm sure.
Sharks is on right now.
course, you can't hear the funky music. And so just to wrap it up, I just have, because I know we talked a lot, what are you actually going to use with this? I think our key takeaways, so it's worth investing in the information architecture to start with. Good information architecture unlocks good UX. And then I think also, I hope what you took away from this is that it's not enough to just build it. I mean, of course, we all talk about governance all the time. It's important to have a way to maintain quality over time. It can't just be documentation. It has to be really like the partnership, I think, between Realm and Evolving Web, that we work together to create the information architecture, something that Perry's team is able to own. I think this really has led to success over the, it's been almost a year since launch, and the site still looks good. So, this is what success looks like. It's not just build it and forget about it. And so we have a few minutes left for questions, and since we have, agency and client here, we're happy to answer questions about process or information architecture ideas or anything else you might be wondering. Yes?
I was wondering, Perry, had you experienced Drupal before?
Yes, actually. So I worked at the University of Toronto for 14 years, 13 of those in Drupal, but 85 sites, individual, very small departmental, but pretty much the same. And walking in, I did not realize that ROM had no, I expected that they had sort of a plan. I think if you recall, at one point, Drupal 7's end of life was 2023, and then suddenly it was 2024. So I started 2 weeks, I think, before they announced the extension. So there was a lot of like, okay, we're 6 months behind, But yes, I had a little bit of experience, not as much as I thought. So I worked with the technology group that did most of the heavy lifting, and I didn't realize how little back-end permission they'd given me. So when we started talking about administration of Drupal, my understanding of some of the complexities was a little bit lacking, which is where working with a partner really helped.
I saw Joanne's hand very small first, so Joanne.
You talked about all the bloat you got rid of, and you got all these events. What do you do with past events?
So we're still working on. We're talking about possibly an ECA. So it was out of scope in the build. We had talked about it. We knew that it was going to be a thing. The intention is that, and I think we even had a governance agreement internally that we would hold it for a month, so that anybody that maybe missed it for a week or something, they could go back and understand that this event had taken place. The intention is that after 4 weeks, they will automatically be either unpublished or deleted in the back end. That has not been implemented yet. Currently, the team is doing this on an ad hoc basis.
Do you use like templates then? Because you're gonna have some, like your Halloween event is gonna be every year,
So that's where the program comes in. So the program page lives on. So although the Halloween event is more of a ROM After Dark specific event, because these are templated, like the event content type is structured. So it's got like a highlight list, it's got, you know, the dates and times and all the regular things, sponsors. All of that is pretty much standardized now, so there's no need to keep a backup copy. That was actually a concern though that was voiced by the marketing team.
Yeah.
Because in previous iterations of the site, they just revived last year's, like unpublished it and republished it, and that has all kinds of negative effects. So yeah, it's a good question.
Yeah, Dave?
Good. Suzanne, like you talked about how you merged several content types together, and Perry, you talked about how you dropped 1,500 or something pieces of content into the new system. Can you talk more about that? Did you just like decide, oh, this is what's going to be best for the future, and everyone came along for the ride, or did you approach that in a certain way to like help get buy-in from everybody?
Go ahead.
Well, we did, start, you can, I'm sure you have more color to add, but we did, like we do run workshops that are designed to get people on the same page so that it's not come across as like, oh, we're killing we're killing your project. It's like orienting it around, you know, what's going to be best for the user experience. So I think that helps with those conversations, really kind of trying to show that this will make it clearer, and this, showing the data on the content.
Yeah, the data definitely helped. As soon as all of that data set was actually originally sent to the governance group, which was then sent to the executive, which mobilized about 50 people at ROM, and we brute forced the review. So we extracted, I think it was a 26-page or separate sheeted Excel document with all the content, direct links to the pages where they were live, plus all the information. Added a content owner to each of them, which took forever. That was like this is where the stakeholder relationships really come in, because I have no idea who owns this one piece of content, but it looks really important. Somebody needs to look at it. But assigned an owner, and as a result of that process, we actually have a custom field in all of our content types, which is contact. And it is the email address of the person who owns this content, so that if there's ever a question in the future, we know who to email about it. We're considering taking like a 6-month ping to just say, this hasn't been updated in 6 months, is this still valid? That's, again, future development. But yeah, a lot of brute force, and how we determined it was need, right? We did find that most of the time it was just out of date, so no longer valid. I found 4 pieces of content as of yesterday that are backup so 3 are republished. 1 is still being debated, but we took a whole backup in Word format of the site. So we programmatically punched out Word documents for each piece of content, so that if there is a question about that, we can just pull it and send it along in Word format, because that's what everyone at ROM uses.
Makes everybody feel safer.
Yeah.
It's gonna work. Yeah, Kyle?
Tyler?
Oh, Tyler, sorry, Tyler.
Can you expand on the type of stakeholders you have?
Sure. So our primary decision-making group is the board, who we never interact with. So our final presentations at each phase of the project went to the executive team. The executive team would report to the board just to make sure. So the board would basically say, this is good, we're not concerned about this. We do from time to time get feedback from them. Oddly enough, mostly on the person type, because they have profiles. But AI has definitely been a board topic that they've come back and asked questions specifically about on the website and how we're using it and things like that. But the governance group, so we have a web advisory group. The representation is in some way, shape, or form every major department of ROM. So including curatorial, so natural history, arts and culture, those are split into 2. Indigenous group, learning writ large, visitor experience, and basically I think it's 17 different individuals represent their departments and communicate back out. So having that as a go-to, like I know a lot of people say, oh, design by committee, that's terrible, you never want to do that. Absolutely not. You don't want to design by committee, that's crazy. But having this committee, I can go once a month now, at the time it was every 2 weeks, I can go to this group and I can say, we need feedback on this thing, or recently somebody wanted to add a new navigation item to the menu. Easy, just this has been proposed. I am supportive of this as the lead of the committee. We'd like your feedback. Are there any? Is there any opposition to making this change? We feel that it's a good change to make. From a stakeholder during the process, it got a little bit deeper to the people like feet on the ground people. So actual educators, actual curatorial staff that were working in projects, because you do have a project content type. 32 individual interviews, and I believe there's about 85 people in total that were part of some type of interview process. And I think that's our time. Or we can hit stop and answer one more question.
Oh, I forgot